Welcome to our world. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Today, during the meeting of the State Council Presidium, together with the heads of the Federation's regions, government leaders, and the heads of ministries and agencies, we will discuss a very important topic, one that is significant for our regions, cities, and entire sectors of the economy. The focus will be on the next steps to further enhance the country's export potential. As we know, Russia is an active participant in international trade. Despite the objective difficulties that Russian businesses are currently facing, we continue to develop foreign business relations, expand their geographical reach, and strengthen cooperation with predictable, reliable partners who, like Russia, understand their national interests and value mutually beneficial trade, production, and cooperative ties. I would add that global trade and, indeed, the entire global economy is undergoing active changes. We often speak about this, and everyone understands it well. A new system of relationships is emerging, with the so-called Global South and rapidly growing countries, as well as members of promising integration associations like BRICS, taking on leading roles. Even now, the contribution of BRICS countries to the global economy exceeds that of the so-called G7, and this trend is continuing to grow. It is not reversing. For interest's sake, and honestly, I look at these figures with curiosity myself. The G7 in 1992 accounted for 45.5% of global GDP, but by 2022, this had dropped to 30.5%. It was 45.5%, and now it's 30%. The forecast for 2028 is 27.9%. And what about BRICS countries? In 1992, without accounting for the new members of the organization, BRICS had a 16.7% share of global GDP, while the G7 held 30.5%. In 2022, the G7 had 30.5%, and BRICS 31.4%. The forecast for 2028 puts BRICS at 33.8%, compared to 27.9% for the G7. This trend is real, it persists, and it won't disappear. These are objective processes, not even related to the current situation, including the conflicts on a well-known front. And with new members joining BRICS, the situation will, of course, change even further. The forecast for BRICS with its new members in 2028 is 38% of global GDP. This means that the real markets of the future are being formed, based on strong strategic partnerships and the principles of combining economic potentials and mutually reinforcing growth. It is important not only to understand these trends but to take advantage of the export opportunities that are opening up for our businesses and enterprises. Support must be provided at all levels. As you know, this year marks the conclusion of the 6-year national project for export support. During this time, tools have been created, including within the regions, to help domestic companies supply products abroad. These tools enabled them to navigate the pandemic and, over the past 2 years, redirect product flows to promising, growing markets. In meetings with business representatives and entrepreneurs, proposals have repeatedly been made to extend our export support project. We have agreed that this will be done. Next year, the renewed national project International Cooperation and Export will be launched. The foundation for its decisions, measures, and mechanisms should be based on the results already achieved in the export sector, the economic development priorities that our country faces, and, of course, the objective global trends I just mentioned. What would I like to highlight in this regard? For confident, long-term development of foreign economic relations, it is necessary to improve the efficiency of financial and informational export support, actively create logistics and transport infrastructure, as well as platforms for production cooperation. It is fundamentally important to stimulate Russian companies' entry into markets for goods with high added value and increase so-called non-resource, non-energy exports, including the supply of machinery, food products, and so on. I would note that from 2001 to 2023, the volume of Russia's non-resource, non-energy exports has increased more than fourfold. This is a good result. Fourfold, not just a percentage increase, but a quadrupling from $36 billion to $148 billion. Of course, this is by no means the limit for us. In fact, it's not all that much yet. In the first 7 months of this year, non-resource, non-energy exports continued to grow, increasing by another 5%, reaching $89.8 billion. In certain areas, such as food exports, Russia has already entered the ranks of the world's leading exporters. This result is, of course, primarily due to the efforts of specialists, the labor collectives at enterprises, as well as development institutions, regional leaders, and federal authorities who provide support. In the address to the Federal Assembly, and subsequently in the Decree on National Development Goals, a target was set, by 2030, to increase non-resource, non-energy exports by at least 2/3 compared to 2023. This is an ambitious goal, especially given the challenges our companies have faced recently. The first of these concerns payment settlements, of course. We are all well aware of this. Absolutely hostile actions have been taken by certain Western elites against Russian financial institutions and payment systems. It has become more difficult both to receive payment for export shipments and to pay for imported goods. To some extent, we have managed to address this problem. Last year, the share of Russian export payments made in so-called toxic Western currencies was halved. Meanwhile, the share of ruble settlements in foreign trade transactions is approaching 40%. From 2021 to 2023, the ruble's share in export settlements nearly tripled, reaching 39%. While the share of ruble payments for imports increased by another 2%, to a total of 30%. We are continuing to work in this direction. Together with our international partners, we plan to further expand the use of national currencies, conduct settlements through clearing payment systems, and so on. It is clear that addressing these tasks will take time, as our key trading partners are closely integrated into the existing global financial system. Around the world, efforts are now being made to develop what is called supranational payment infrastructure. I want to emphasize this point. Many countries and regions worldwide are working intensively on this, with the possibility of using central bank digital currencies and digital financial assets. Such a system will operate seamlessly and independently of third countries. I want to stress this. It's not just us dealing with this because of recent events. This is a global trend in all regions. In the Middle East, in Asia, everyone is thinking about it. Everyone is coming up with different options. The second point I want to highlight, in recent years, the costs for our exporters related to the handling of goods have increased. Freight rates for ships, insurance, and other expenses have risen. Clearly, this has a direct impact on prices, which in turn affects the competitiveness of domestic products abroad. We must, of course, tackle the logistical barriers to Russian exports. We need to ensure transport connectivity, as they say, from the first to the last kilometer. Primarily, this applies to promising markets in the global South, Africa, and Latin America. In fact, these have traditionally been our markets for selling our products. That's where they have mainly been. To support this, new routes and international transport corridors are being developed, such as the North-South Corridor, the corridors in the Azov Black Sea and eastern directions, as well as the Northern Sea route. Once again, I want to emphasize that the introduction of transport infrastructure facilities must be synchronized with the development of logistics services. Warehouses, terminals, cargo handling, and so on. And construction timelines should align with plans to increase supplies to friendly countries and expand into new, growing markets. In this regard, the third point I would like to address. We are actively working through the Eurasian Economic Union, EAEU, and expanding free trade areas with foreign partners. At the same time, many countries today are establishing high levels of tariff protection. Despite some progress made by our companies, they still face challenges in finding buyers, organizing business negotiations, and obtaining marketing information in these countries. Moreover, mechanisms for protecting the rights and investments of Russian investors abroad have not yet been established with all of our partners. This is an important area of work for the Russian Export Center, our trade missions abroad, and, of course, the regions. Moving on. We must acknowledge that Russian finished goods, including high-tech products, are generally known worldwide in narrow segments. At the same time, our enterprises are ready to produce a wide range of high-quality, competitive, and environmentally friendly products. It is also important to promote them responsibly and professionally so that as many potential buyers as possible become aware of them. Efforts should be made both in person and remotely, as they say, on the ground, as well as through digital channels and trade platforms. The Russian Export Center has a special program, Made in Russia, which helps build a positive image of domestic brands. This practice needs to be scaled up and its coverage expanded. I ask the government and the REC to prepare a joint action plan on this matter. Furthermore, Russian goods, particularly industrial products with high added value, must not only be recognizable but also accessible to foreign buyers. And finally, the fifth point. Exporters, especially small and medium-sized companies, often mention that they lack a clear picture of the support measures provided by the government and the regions. The external economic strategies of the regions are often not synchronized with the federal strategy and agenda. Of course, some federal subjects consistently and comprehensively develop non-resource exports, including from smaller businesses. To support this, regional export support centers have been established, and teams of specialized professionals are in place. In the framework of interregional cooperation, partnerships with friendly countries are being developed, which, of course, contributes to strengthening Russia's technological sovereignty. This sets a higher pace for the economic development of the federal subject and, consequently, for the entire country. We must and will continue to support the efforts of federal subjects in the export sector. At the same time, I want to emphasize that we need to systematically develop exports across the entire territory of Russia, including non-resource exports, and coordinate regional and federal initiatives in this area. And, of course, I ask the government and the Russian Export Center to assist colleagues in the federal subjects by providing the necessary guidance and issuing timely and relevant recommendations. Dear colleagues, supporting exporters and increasing the supply of Russian products to foreign markets is a shared responsibility of businesses, federal and regional authorities, our development institutions, and representatives abroad. At the same time, I want to stress that the main goal, strangely enough, is not simply to increase the tonnage, cubic meters of shipments, or even the sums of export revenues. The key goal is that exports and the competitiveness of Russian companies in global markets serve as a catalyst for the modernization of our industry, agriculture, services, and many other sectors, stimulating the efficiency growth of domestic enterprises and creating modern, well-paying jobs right here in Russia. This is the ultimate objective. And, of course, working together with foreign partners on external trade infrastructure, reliable supply channels, and deep technological cooperation helps to establish stronger ties between governments and citizens. In our discussion today, I propose we proceed based on these fundamental considerations. I understand that, as Alexei Gennadiev just mentioned, the discussions yesterday were quite active, which is very positive. The proposals made by the heads of federal subjects at the seminar certainly deserve attention. We will definitely review several of them today. In the meantime, I ask my colleagues from the presidential administration to consolidate all these proposals and ideas and, based on today's discussion, send them for detailed consideration by the government. Let's begin. Please, Alexander Vitalievich, go ahead. Dear Vladimir Vladimirovich, esteemed colleagues, our Commission on International Cooperation and Export within the framework of the State Council has been created and is operational. The composition has already been formed, and the first meeting has taken place. There is great interest, many issues, but we are beginning to address them systematically, and I believe we will succeed. The regions are now playing a key role in export development, and for many, export activity is a major contributor to their budgets, directly influencing their socio-economic development. For the region's economies, exports generate tax revenues of 4 trillion rubles, which is nearly 24% of the total tax revenues of the regions. The regions maintain constant, close communication with their exporters, especially now, when they are often completely revising their business strategies, acting swiftly, finding new foreign consumers, and restructuring logistics for new markets. To ensure this work is effective, we have been carefully reviewing all issues, making necessary decisions, and acting in a targeted manner in the interests of each specific regional exporter, with some of these decisions later becoming systemic. That is why the new Commission is precisely the platform where regions can share best practices, jointly discuss problems, propose solutions, and, importantly, agree on inter-regional cooperation. In terms of export, this area is extremely necessary. Exports play a vital role in Russia's economy, directly or indirectly contributing around 31% of the country's budget revenues, providing over 12 million jobs, and accounting for almost a quarter of the gross domestic product. Historically, the majority of non-resource and non-energy exports have been directed to friendly countries, including India, Iran, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and China. Despite the complexities of global relations, trade turnover with these nations continues to grow. The conditions for engaging in foreign trade have changed, with sanctions acting as a catalyst, but it is quite clear that this was only a matter of time. As you, Vladimir Vladimirovich, have mentioned in detail, the stagnation of European markets was inevitable in the coming decades, which would have inevitably led to the need for reorienting export flows. Therefore, the current situation should be seen more as an opportunity to be among the first on this path and to set the rules of the game in these international markets moving forward. This progress is partly due to the ability of our exporters to quickly adapt to changing conditions. Since 2022, they have been actively restructuring their business models and logistical routes, establishing new markets, and building partnerships with countries focused on long-term, mutually beneficial, and respectful cooperation. By the end of 2023, the share of industrial exports to friendly countries increased by 15% compared to 2022, reaching almost 80%. However, it must be acknowledged that the total volume of non-resource, non-energy industrial exports has not yet reached the level of 2021, and our task today is to reach that level and, from there, move at an accelerated pace to achieve your directive of increasing non-resource, non-energy exports by 2/3 by 2030 compared to 2023. On this path, we currently identify several challenges or issues. The most pressing, perhaps, is logistics and payment processing, as you have mentioned. Let me start with logistics. Logistical constraints in redirecting export flows to new markets in friendly countries require the development of new routes and fine-tuning the necessary logistics and distribution infrastructure. Unblocking bottlenecks and ensuring seamless logistical services to target markets is essential. A significant portion of our export goods originates in central Russia, Siberia, and the Urals, while the entry points to international routes are located in the south and east. Therefore, in addition to the already adopted decisions to expand the eastern section of Russian railways and increase the density of roads in eastern Russia, it is also necessary to coordinate regional infrastructure with prospective international transport corridor projects, primarily the North-South Corridor and the Northern Sea Route. And as you mentioned, Vladimir Vladimirovich, it is essential to work on ensuring transportation connectivity, securing the entire route from the first to the last mile along which export goods travel. Thank you for joining us on Our World. If you found this content valuable, please like, comment, and subscribe.